All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling a question that I think we've all wrestled with at some point. Why is it that some people, even when they have all the potential in the world, just seem to get stuck?
Oh, absolutely. It's a question that has really intrigued thinkers for centuries, you know?
Yeah.
And even in today's world, like with everything moving so fast, it feels more relevant than ever, you know?
Yeah, totally. I mean, think about it, right? To really dig into this, we're diving into this piece called Some People Are Made to Rot, The Harsh Reality of Wasted Potential. The title's a bit, intense. But I gotta say, the stuff they talk about inside, super worth thinking about.
I agree, yeah. It does a great job, I think, of laying out those patterns, those
Yeah.
mindsets, the stuff that can really trip people up.
Yeah.
And I think it'll resonate with you, with listeners on a personal level.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The article starts off talking about this idea of the procrastination paradox. It makes this point that a lot of times it's not that people don't know what to do or they don't have the skills. It's more that they're choosing to, I don't know, go for instant gratification instead of those like long-term goals. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really accurate. I mean, just look around, right? The world we live in, it's like it's designed to tempt us with those dopamine hits, like all the
Sure.
time. It's the scrolling on social media, binge watching shows, even hitting snooze too many times. It's all the same,
Yeah.
And the more we sort of give in to those immediate rewards, the harder it becomes to actually, make those things that are important in the long run a priority.
It's almost like we're wired to prioritize the easy stuff, the fun stuff, even when we know the harder stuff might be way more rewarding down the line, right?
Exactly. And I love the way they put it in the article, that phrase, endlessly chasing dopamine hits. It really captures that feeling of being trapped, like you're always looking for those quick fixes instead of that deeper sense of fulfillment.
Yeah, it makes you stop and think, okay, what are those dopamine traps in my own life? The things I reach for when I'm feeling stressed or just blah. It's definitely something to think about. But it brings up something else interesting that they talk about in the article. The people who are stuck in that rut of procrastination, they often become super critical of the people who are actually, taking action. Why do you think that is?
Hey, that's a great question, and I think it comes down to maybe a couple of things. One, it can be a defense mechanism. It's like when you're not living up to your own potential, it's almost easier to pick on other people's flaws than to really face your own shortcomings. It's a way of kind of shifting blame and saying, well, hey, it's okay, I'm not doing great. Look at them.
It's like, yeah, look, they're messing up too, so it doesn't matter if I am too.
Right. And the second thing I think is that seeing other people take action can actually trigger feelings of envy, or even like feeling inadequate. It's a reminder of your own potential, and that can be uncomfortable to really look at.
It makes total sense. And it links back to that idea of the comfort zone that the article talks about. There's that phrase, it really stuck with me, comfort is the enemy of progress. Why do you think we're so drawn to comfort, even when it's holding us back?
Well, I mean, think about it. Comfort, by its very nature, feels good, right? It's what it's safe, it's predictable, and our brains are kind of they're wired to seek out that safety and security. But the problem is real growth. It rarely happens in that safe space. It happens when you push yourself, when you're willing to get a little uncomfortable, to risk failure.
Yeah. It's that classic no pain, no gain, right? But it's so easy to forget that when you're like, nestled in your routine, just doing your thing.
Totally. And the article has some great examples of this, like wanting to be in amazing shape, but not wanting to hit the gym, or dreaming of being rich, but not willing to learn about money or take any risks.
It's wanting the reward without the work.
Yeah. And that brings us to another cool point they bring up, this idea of the fallacy of waiting for magic.
I think we've all been there at some point, haven't we?
Oh, for sure. It's that deep down belief that something outside of us that's going to come along and magically fix everything,
Yeah.
like winning the lottery, getting the perfect job offer, like a sudden burst of genius, And sure, those things happen. But if you're relying on that as your main strategy for success, well, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Because ultimately, it's about taking control of your own life and actually doing something, right? Even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. And there's this example they use that's really perfect for this. Imagine someone offers you $1 million to quit your $10,000 a year job. Logically, you take it, right? But
Yeah.
the article suggests some people would actually hesitate
Wait, really? Who would turn down $1 million?
because for some people, that fear of change, the fear of what they don't know, it's just too much. It outweighs even that potential reward. They might tell themselves a million's not enough, or that they wouldn't know what to do with it, or that they'd lose it all.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how our own beliefs and fears can hold us back, even from amazing opportunities.
Yeah, it really is. And it highlights how important it is to recognize those beliefs and challenge them because, like they say in the article, opportunity doesn't always stick around.
Yeah.
The people who hesitate, the people who are always waiting for that perfect moment or the magical solution, they often miss out.
So then what's the cure for this waiting for magic thinking?
It starts with realizing that we can create our own luck. It's about shifting your focus from what's going on around you to what's inside you. Like, what skills can you learn? What can you learn about? What actions can you take, like right now, to get closer to your goals?
It's becoming the hero of your own story, not waiting for someone to come rescue you.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where the article gets really practical. They talk about how to actually break free from all that procrastination and inaction. They talk about honest self-reflection, taking action even if it's not perfect, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and thinking long term.
It's not that you're destined to fail, it's that you're making choices.
Right.
Choices that either match up with what you want or they don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that really stood out to me was how they emphasized starting small. You don't have to change everything overnight. Even tiny steps in the right direction can make a big difference over time.
It's like building momentum. Each small step leads to the next one and pushes you towards your goals.
Exactly. It's about consistency,
Yeah.
showing up for yourself every day, even when you don't feel like it.
This has been so interesting so far, so many great points. But before we keep going, I want to ask you, the listener, a question. Think about everything we've been talking about today. What's one small step you could take, like right now, to break free from that pattern of putting things off or just not taking action?
That's a really powerful question to think about. And remember, even the smallest action can be the start of something big. It's like instead of saying, I can't, you say, okay, how can I? That little shift, it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's like turning that feeling of being stuck into a sense of possibility, like you actually have some control.
Exactly. Instead of feeling trapped, you start to see yourself as someone who can actually shape their own reality.
So we've been talking about these different these obstacles to reaching our potential, and one thing that keeps popping up is this idea of fear. I'm curious, how do you see fear playing into all of this?
Fear, man, it's sneaky. It can look like procrastination, self-doubt, even that critical voice we were talking about.
Yeah.
It can make you hesitate, hold you back from taking risks, from putting yourself out there, from even trying new things.
It's like fear builds this wall between where you are and where you want to be, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the article, it actually calls out a few specific fears that tend to trip people up. There's the fear of failure, of course, which can just stop you from even starting.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, right? Nobody likes to feel like they've messed up.
Right. And then there's this fear of success, which might sound strange, but it's actually pretty common. Some people are actually scared of what might happen if they reach their goals.
Yeah.
Like, will they lose friends? Will they have more responsibility? Will they be able to handle it all?
It's like they're afraid of the unknown, but on a deeper level, right? Like how success might change them and not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, you've got the fear of judgment, which can be the worst. It's that fear of what other people will think if you try and it doesn't work out.
I bet social media has made that fear even worse for a lot of people, don't you think?
I think so, yeah. It's so easy to compare yourself to everyone else and feel like you're not good enough. But the thing is, everyone feels fear, right? It's a normal human thing. It's about not letting it run your life.
So if fear is like everywhere, how do we deal with it? Can you even get rid of fear completely?
I don't think you can ever totally get rid of fear. But you can learn how to manage it so it doesn't control you. So it doesn't stop you from going after what you want. And the first step, like they talk about in the article, is just being aware of it. You got to become aware of how fear is showing up in your life. Like, what are you actually afraid of? What What triggers those fears? And what are you doing to avoid those
It's
triggers?
like shining a light on those fears, right? Bringing them out into the open so you can really look at them.
Exactly. And once you know what you're dealing with, then you can start to challenge those fears. Are they real? Or are they just, stories you're telling yourself? What proof do you have that these fears are actually true?
It's like putting those fears on trial, right?
Yeah.
See if they actually hold up.
Right. And often when you really look at your fears, with a clear head, you realize they're not as scary as you thought they were.
So it's not about getting rid of fear. It's about like changing how you see it.
Right.
So it doesn't have so much power over you.
Exactly. And part of that reframing process, it involves asking yourself some tough questions. Like, okay, what's the worst that could happen if this fear came true? And how would I deal with that?
It's true. Sometimes just thinking about the fear is worse than the thing you're actually afraid of, you know?
A lot of times, yeah. And when you start to think about those worst case scenarios, you often realize, hey, you're tougher than you think you are.
And even if things don't go perfectly, you'll figure it out. You'll find a way to make it through and come out stronger on the other side.
Exactly. And that brings us back to this idea of courage. Remember, courage isn't about not having any fear. It's about acting even when you are afraid. It's about saying, okay, I'm scared, but I'm doing it anyway.
So courage isn't being fearless, it's being afraid and doing it anyway.
Exactly. And the more you practice that courage, the more comfortable you get with being uncomfortable, with not knowing what's going to happen, with the possibility of failing. And that's where real growth happens.
It's like building up that resilience muscle, that ability to bounce back from setbacks and keep going even when things are hard.
And that muscle, it gets stronger every time you face a challenge, every time you face a fear.
This has been so helpful. I feel like we've really gotten into the nitty-gritty of fear, comfort zones, courage, and how they all kind of work together on this journey of personal growth.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation.
Talking about all this fear and discomfort, it makes me think about comfort zones. We've touched on this a little, but I think it's worth digging a little deeper. It seems like there's this balance between wanting to be comfortable and needing to push yourself beyond your comfort zone.
That's a good point. Comfort zones, they're tricky. They can give you a sense of security, stability, which is important, but they can also turn into like traps that stop you from growing and changing.
It's like that thing with the lobster in its shell, The lobster needs its shell for protection, but it has to shed it to grow bigger. And shedding that shell, that can be uncomfortable, even painful.
That's perfect. And I think the key is to figure out when your comfort zone is helping you and when it's holding you back. Like, when is it giving you space to recharge, and when is it stopping you from taking risks, following your passions, and really becoming who you could be?
It's that whole life begins at the end of your comfort zone thing, right? But how do you know when it's time to push past those boundaries? What are some signs that maybe you're clinging to comfort a little too much?
That's a great question. I think one big sign is feeling stagnant. Like, are you feeling stuck? Are you just going through the motions every day without any real excitement or purpose? Are you avoiding challenges or opportunities to grow?
It's like being on autopilot, just going through the motions, not really living.
Exactly. And another sign is a feeling of, I don't know, dissatisfaction, restlessness. Are you feeling unfulfilled? Are you wanting more? Are you always comparing yourself to other people and feeling like you're not as good?
Yeah, those are all great points. It's like there's this voice inside saying there has to be more to life than this. But sometimes it's hard to hear that voice over all the noise of everyday life,
Oh, absolutely. And that's why it's so important to make time for yourself, to quiet the noise, and really ask yourself some honest questions. Like, what's really important to me? What am I passionate about? What kind of life do I really want to live?
It's about getting clear on what you value, what your priorities are, what you're aiming for, and then having the guts to take action, even if it means leaving your comfort zone and being a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And that discomfort, like we've been saying, it's often a sign that you're on the right track. It means you're growing, you're challenging yourself, you're expanding your horizons.
It's like those butterflies you get before you give a presentation or go on a first date, right? It can be scary, but it can also be exciting. It means you're alive, you're pushing yourself, you're going beyond your limits.
And the more you embrace those uncomfortable moments, the more resilient you become, It's like building up a tolerance for uncertainty and challenges.
So instead of running from discomfort, you can start to see it as a sign that you're on the path to growth and change, right?
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful way to look at it. Instead of being afraid of discomfort, you start to welcome it.
This has been such a great conversation. I feel like we've really gone deep into fear, comfort zones, courage, and how they're all connected on this path of personal growth.
I agree. Yeah. It's been really fascinating.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to ask you, the listener, something. Think about your own life right now. Where are you feeling uncomfortable? And what might that discomfort be trying to tell you?
That's a great question to think about. Remember, it's often in those uncomfortable moments that you discover your strengths and find hidden opportunities to grow.
As we're wrapping up this deep dive into why some people just never seem to reach their potential, it kind of hits me that the article, even though it's got that strong title, some people are made to rot, it doesn't actually say that everyone's doomed.
Yeah, you're right. It could have easily gone down that path of saying, well, you're either meant for this or you're not. But
Right.
but it doesn't. It actually ends up being really empowering.
Exactly. It keeps saying it's not about luck or where you came from or some destiny thing. It's about the choices you make, like every single day.
And it reminds us that we have a lot more control than we think.
Mm.
We can choose to stay stuck in those same old ruts, the procrastination, the comfort seeking, the running from fear, or we can choose to break free,
Yeah.
to challenge ourselves, to get comfortable with being uncomfortable so we can grow.
But it's not just a pep talk, right? The article actually gives some real steps you can take to shift from that passive way of thinking to a more, I don't know, active, empowered one.
Oh yeah, for sure. It starts with looking at yourself. Honest self-reflection, that's huge. You got to see your patterns, understand what sets you off, figure out the fears that are holding you back.
It's like taking stock of what's going on inside, right? The good and the bad, the things that motivate you and the things that don't.
Exactly. And once you've done that, that inner work, then you can start moving from just thinking about it to actually doing something. Like the article says, action beats perfection. You don't need to have everything figured out or wait for the perfect time to start. You just got to take that first step, even if it's messy.
It's that done is better than perfect idea, right? We
Yeah.
get so caught up in the details or scared of making mistakes that we end up just doing nothing.
Oh yeah, that's a classic trap.
Yeah.
But the article reminds us that action, that's the opposite of being stuck. It's by doing, even if it's not perfect, that we learn and grow and start moving forward.
And it's about being consistent too, right? It's not enough to just get a burst of energy or inspiration and then that's it. You got to keep showing up for yourself, building those good habits that build on each other over time.
Couldn't agree more. The article talks about how important discipline and consistency are. It's about resisting those urges for instant gratification, those dopamine hits, and focusing on the long game, the bigger picture.
It's like being a gardener, right? You plant those seeds, you tend to them consistently, knowing that they'll grow into something beautiful eventually.
Oh, I love that. And speaking of that long-term vision, the article also talks about thinking beyond just right now. It encourages us to connect with our values, those core principles that give our lives meaning, that point us in the right direction.
Because when you're rooted in those deeper values, those things that really matter to you, it's easier to make choices that support your long-term goals, even when those choices are hard or uncomfortable right now.
Exactly. It's about having that bigger why, the thing that keeps you going when things get tough, the thing that reminds you why you're putting in the work.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive. I feel like we've peeled back so many layers of this question of why some people just don't reach their potential. But instead of feeling, down about it, I actually feel, I don't know, kind of hopeful.
Me too. Me too. The message isn't about giving up or resigning yourself to anything. It's about taking charge of your life, choosing a path that leads to growth, to fulfillment, to becoming the best version of yourself.
Now, as we wrap up this whole exploration, we want to leave you, the listener, with one last question to think about. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about reaching their full potential, what would it be?
Yeah, really sit with that question. What wisdom would you share, knowing everything you know now?
And as you think about that, remember, it's never too late to change direction, to embrace those challenges, to step into the unknown and start living a life that really reflects your true potential. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll catch you next time.